Perhaps there was enough groundwork done the last few nights that some of you could tighten your intellectual seatbelts. Let me see if I can pull your attention to draw some of this together in what I might suggest could be in this unexpected manner, having to do with the simplicity and the complexity of the human system, and having to do with the fact that regardless of anything a man says about life, that it always sounds as though it is some form of criticism. It is not. In spite of my many jokes about standing in the slaughter queue and waiting to become part of the great Oscar Mayer in the sky, it is not in any case, no matter what your nervous system or your neighbor has told you, it is not in any case that life has it in for you, that life has it in for man, that we're paying off some kind of debt. It's more like the peculiar and the very limited position from which men have to look at life. Inasmuch as no system can perceive itself totally from its own level, there is no way, as witnessed by the strange philosophical history of man, there's no way that the human intellect can satisfactorily explain itself. It can't even begin. They can't do it now in the midst of the neurobiological explosion. Philosophers could not, and I might add, if you had that kind of singular turn of mind, you would not be worried about philosophers and neurologists anyway, because if you want to know how the human intellect works, where the hell do you have to go? If you say that you don't have anything to work with, that you got to go somewhere else to look, or you got to go find a book, it'd be my personal opinion that you don't hold a great deal of promise of ever finding out anything anyway. But back to the situation, it is that at its own level, no system, including the human intellect, can properly perceive itself. Such as if you're going to take ordinary consciousness, 3D consciousness, and since we cannot adequately verbally describe it, or else we'd be belying what I just told you, that no system at its own level can adequately or totally describe itself, we'll have to pretend for a second that 3D consciousness is like 2D consciousness, a good old idea of living on a plane. If that's where you are, and then look at life as being at least three-dimensional. But we're all living here, and that's the best we can see, in all kinds of directions there. Then off the plane is what the hell's going on. And that's what I laughingly refer to at times as the life of life. It's not that life is tricking you, but it's as though almost that we're in the basement somewhere. We're back in a corner. Life is all up in the attic. And all you got's a little peephole. And what you see, you cannot make total sense of. And you never will, not from the ordinary level. If that's the only place you have to look from, it will never make sense, because no system, whether it be men, whether it be anything else that you can perceive, no system at its own level can adequately describe itself. It's just a fact. Regardless that you had to get it from me, and that you won't hear it from life, it's a fact. No system, nothing. All right. Having already set that up, let me start off and speak some more about the circuitous, non-ending linear loop that is the human nervous system. And as that great Midwestern American psychologist Chuck Berry used to say, you know, the joint is jumping, going round and round. And that's what you're left with. Instead of me drawing out the nervous system, which I have oftentimes done, even while telling you that it is not in some two-dimensional or even three-dimensional plane, it would be better to look at it. Of course, I'm still drawing it two-dimensionally, which is just as flawed, but it's to look at it as a non-ending loop. If you could now try and picture it, it's just simply floating out in three-dimensional space and then divided up, as men have been wont to do for so long, like into the visceral level, into just the life of the body, the mute, all of the organic, the animalistic levels of the body, if you want to look at it that way, and then look at the nervous system moving up into the generally referred to limbic system that seems to be the seat through the nervous system of human emotions. If you look at the limbic system as the emotions, and then into the higher brain region, the cerebral cortex, the human intellect. It is a non-ending, and at the three-dimensional, this is not the extent of it, but the three-dimensional level, it would seem to be a returning loop. And it's for that basis that I brought out that they even biologists, neurologists, even today cannot come to any firm conclusion, and I'm telling you they never will be able to say, for instance, whether, let's speak about what seems to be the nervous system, the limbic aspect of the nervous system, human emotions. They cannot say, just for the reason I told you. They believe they don't have enough data yet. But that's not it. It's that no system can totally perceive itself at its own level. But at any rate, it's why they cannot say for a fact that the human nervous system, that there you are, and a big fat man with a beard and a knife, or a lion, jumps out, and that your senses perceive the danger, and it runs up the nervous system. Let us say that you take it in just at the visceral level, that you just see the danger, and it runs in to the higher parts of the nervous system, and you run rather than stay there and try to fight. They cannot say for a fact whether you are now running because you were frightened, or that the visceral level, not having to think about it, not having to analyze the situation, the visceral level started running before the rest of the nervous system really had chance to wet its pants. That you're already running, and they cannot say now that whether you are scared because you're running or whether you're running because you're scared. Now, I brought that up last time we met, but it goes even further if you can now get a little more complex. Our good old friend Rene, at least he got him off the street when he came up with the idea of I think, therefore I am. And no one's ever seen fit to be able to try and turn that around, because it is the same situation, if you can see what I'm pointing at. But now it is into the realm of the intellect, wherein the intellect has the inclination, to say the least, to tell itself. That is, the internal dialogue in you telling you and other people telling each other that, wait a minute, when it gets into intellectual problems, we're not dealing with the same kind of basic uncertainties we are trying to deal with the physiology, the psychology of the body and the human nervous system, the human psyche, blah, blah, blah. They believe that in some way we'll get closer when it gets into strictly intellectual realms. But if you can see what I am pointing at, to say that I think, therefore I am, which I'm glad it got the guy a job and got him out of the house, got him tenure somewhere. But it would be equally as true to say I am because I think. That you cannot say that I am aware that I'm conscious because I'm thinking. It could be that you're thinking only because you exist. That either way it's true. Either way it presents the kind of loop of linear intelligence that you cannot say where it started and where it stops. I keep using terms that I wanted to try and clarify a bit after what I've talked about the last few weeks. I keep referring to three-dimensional consciousness and three-dimensional reality. I don't mean anything at all weird for you people getting this at other times and other places on this tape. Nothing strange whatsoever. Simply the life that everybody takes it to be, that you take in through the senses. Regardless of what else you may think that humans do, they don't. What you are, what you think, what you feel is limited to the senses. That's it. And at that level, everybody, at that level of intelligence, just everybody perceives that we're in a three-dimensional world. And on that basis, we have three-dimensional intelligence, or consciousness. Now, many times I refer to old Chief Two Eyes, and I talk about dualistic consciousness, and etc. And I have done that for a long time for a specific reason, but I want to be sure that no one thinks that there is some great trick between dualistic affairs of everything either being right or wrong, true or false, and then in some way that has a less direct connection with what seems to be the perception of a 3D world. I had a little model made. Everyone has a three-dimensional conception of life, but they do not take it into account. They have it. They do not take it on the account of this basis. Now, what I had made, is it picking up fine? So I made this little stool. Let's consider that a man, an ordinary man's intelligence or his consciousness of what reality is. He perceives that there are three possibilities going on at all times, that reality is a triaxial phenomenon. People do not consider it this way, but they do, and they do it on this basis. That the three things that make up reality at any given time to anybody's perception. I don't care what it is, there are no exceptions. Their perception is, your thinking is, that one part of it, let's call it the red part, is meaningful to you, which is all that matters. It's meaningful to you. So you've got the meaningful, then you've got the resistance to the meaningful, always. And then you've got the one that I had them do up like this, is the irrelevant. And if you question anyone, they will say, well, yeah, you're right. They don't see the importance of it, but if you said anything you think about the political situation in our country today, the growing power of the Republican Party, yes, I'm all in favor of it. All right. Then they see that as meaningful. But they also see those wildly untrustworthy Democrats. In other words, resistance to their right thinking. So everything has resistance. And I say, all right, so speaking just in that realm, just politically, we've got that which is meaningful, and always it's resistance. Always. So the guy would say, yeah, that is an ordinary person. And I'd say, all right, there's a third one. Even in the political realm, just in this local area under which we're now taking consideration. And that is the irrelevant. An ordinary intelligence, I guess, could say, well, I don't understand. And I'd say, all right, everything else. The price of pork bellies. The economic situation in Liberia. The temperature in Moscow. Anything other than what seems to be pertinent and the resistance to that pertinence, and whatever we're discussing, I don't care what it is, you can pick it out. There's the third one, which is everything else that is irrelevant as far as ordinary intelligence is concerned to the matter at hand. The phenomenon of life moving from the ordinary 3D view works like this, though, even though people do not consider this third leg. They just barely will consider this. They certainly do not consider it worthwhile. They do not consider it necessary. In fact, the most people's way of thinking, if I ask them in the right way, they would say, well, the whole point of being alive, or at least being successful, is to get the hell rid of this part. Whatever it is. So that things can go forward in a more efficient, decent, humane manner. But to say that there's some importance over here. Now, I just picked out politics, you can pick out religion, economics, you can pick out your love life. It does not have to be an apparent institutional or large segment affair. It can just be you. You're alive. But everything you think about, everything that you dream about, there's always the meaningful, what you want to do, and the resistance, and then everything else. Anything that does not fit into that is this striped leg. So for a second, let me assume that I could get some ordinary person's intelligence to say, all right, yeah, theoretically, okay, but what's the point? The point is this: nothing moves until this thing begins to shift. And by shifting, it is not simply one thing turning into another. What happens that ordinary intelligence cannot perceive, cannot take into account whatsoever, is that from the whole pool of that which seems to be irrelevant to whatever the situation is, which includes, at any given time, what? We're going to take a guess. We're going to figure 99.5% of everything. But no matter what it is, whether it's you and your love life, or whether it's your attitude about the Republicans and the Democrats, then everything else that does not enter into that segment is going to be the irrelevant. But now, if anything is going to happen, and things are going to happen because life is going to continue to grow, it is not simply that the Democrats suddenly take over from the Republicans, to stay with that example, or it's not that the Republicans finally wipe out the last known self-admitted Democrat walking the face of the North American continent. What changes is this gradually will shift, and it does not shift two-dimensionally, it does not shift three-dimensionally, but that's the best we can explain here. And it begins to draw out from both sides, and not in just a linear direction, but it begins to draw out from that which was previously, as far as you are concerned, perhaps you and many other people, but the only thing you should be concerned about, if you've got any sense, is you. It begins to draw out from that which was irrelevant. I don't know that I should even make any example. I said that which is irrelevant, whatever you look at. Well, I've been living with so-and-so. We've been married, we've been living together, and he or she is about to drive me crazy. Something's got to happen. I've either got to leave the person, or they're going to have to change their act, if something does happen, it was not that you began to overcome the other person. It was not withal that they began to get the better of you. The affair, whatever it may cease to be. It may go the way of the dinosaurs. It may go the way of the Populist Party. It may go the way of the Bull Moose Party. The Democrats may disappear in name. The Republicans may disappear. But if the situation seems to have some continuity, that it does seem to undergo some kind of change, the change comes about by that one area that is not taken into consideration of the irrelevant, the information, energy begins to be drawn from that into the other two, into that which to you seems to be either meaningful or resistance. Now, a specific aspect of that gets down to this, that ordinary intelligence inside this closed loop at the ordinary level, ordinary intelligence cannot perceive new information. And this comes about in a very peculiar way, in that ordinary intelligence cannot perceive the distinction between information that is new and information that is different. It is thus left to deal only with information that is different. At the ordinary level of affairs, though, this is all that's necessary. But what this produces is the effect that many people throughout history, many of you I'm sure, feel as though I can almost think about, or maybe you feel, but I can almost grasp what it is that I want to know or I want to experience. But it's almost as though the closer I feel like I'm getting for the ring, somebody takes the damn merry-go-round and kind of just shifts it over a little bit, so at the next pass around, it's still just, you can read people saying that 5,000 years ago. The thing is, ordinary intelligence, whether it was Greek intelligence of 5,000 years ago, or whether it's you, circa 1989, in Freeport, ordinary intelligence cannot divine the difference between new information and different information. One of the reasons is it cannot use, comparably speaking, it cannot use real new information. When something apparently new happens at the three-dimensional level, that which occurs that you see three-dimensionally, it is not really new. Now, you could make a good argument if you were ordinary that this part of the world now being the cutting edge of civilization, the whole aspect of the technology revolution, civilization taking the quantum leaps it has in the last 100 years, would not have happened, let us say, had it not been for one invention, the light bulb. But we'd still be working simply by sunlight and etc. I could make a great argument for that if somebody hadn't already. That was a great cutting line, but it was not. The light bulb was not a new invention. The processes involved with the light bulb, the theories behind its workings, the materials had been around for a long time. The whole idea of the light bulb was not new at all. The information, the apparent congealing of information and energies that produced a Thomas Edison and that he produced, according to Western history, the light bulb, was not new information. It was different uses. It was different slight shifts of what had already been information of that which seemed to be the attempt to make something that would light up and burn longer than 30 seconds. And then the resistance to it, which in this case appeared to be strictly physical, scientific. As far as I know, Thomas Edison didn't believe that somebody was chanting voodoo curses to try to keep him from inventing the light bulb. But there was resistance. He had to go through thousands of kinds of materials to try to come up with a filament that would burn. And so, but there was a slight shift. It was not absolute new intelligence. Or put to you another way, those of you who recall it, if information, a form of energy, if it is too drastic, ordinary intelligence cannot even see it. It just doesn't exist. You may hear the words, go, ah. You or all of humanity could hear it and go, ah, yeah, I hear that. But if it's too drastic, it cannot be used. if I need to push the example, as I said, the workable theory behind the light bulb had been around, just to my little knowledge, not being a historian, for at least 50 or 60 years. Or how about, if you need another one, Leonardo had down all the mechanics of a flying machine, except for at least an internal combustion engine, something they didn't have to plug in with an extension cord that was 200 miles long. The information was too drastic for the time. He could look at it, he could show it to one of his partners, some of his friends, and they'd go, wow, what is that? And he said, well, it's a thing that would fly if I had all this stuff that would work. And they'd go, oh, well, that's great. Now, I just picked a very hard physical example, but examples exist here throughout history that I'm going to get to, or try to get you to see it for yourself. The human nervous system as it is, ordinary intelligence, cannot use new information. Now, life makes people believe that they are seeking it, that that's what they want. They may call it something else. They may not call it information, but they believe that that is what they are seeking. If it were available at the ordinary level, you could not hear it. Or if somebody showed it to you, you would look, and it would be the same way as Leonardo's garbage man. And Leonardo say, look at that, and he's drawn it out. Those of you who had never looked back at some of the notebooks, by all reports, had it been, if he just had an engine, just a little old lawnmower, a two-cycle engine, that son of a bitch would have flown. He could have built it. But he could have showed it to his garbage man or his maid and said, this is something you could get in and fly. And the guy go, oh, that's great, and walk out. He's not going to remember that. It is too drastic. In fact, it was too drastic for Leonardo. I'm sure that he had to finally lay it down, because he looked around and he thought, well... But in the area that people believe that they're looking for something that will be an extraordinary extension of their own experience, their own understanding, the very thing that they're seeking, if it came up, as I believe it was also Descartes used to say, and bit them on the ass, they wouldn't recognize it. They could not. Not because of stupidity, it's because of the view that ordinary intelligence has as to what's going on. There is within everybody, to varying degrees, but people who might be seeing this tape at some time, unless you stumbled in by accident looking for the AA meeting, then you would probably be at the more active end of those kinds of people who seek, without knowing it again, but what they are seeking is some point of reference that is external to this closed linear loop of intelligence. Now, of course, people do not analyze it this way, and people do not discuss it, but that's what they're doing, as witnessed by all the conjuring up of such things as the notion of God, which is exactly that there is something permanent, stable outside this closed loop, this merry-go-round that I cannot get off of. It is manifested in that. It is manifested in a slightly less religious way, the philosophical idea that there is an objective truth, or there is the truth, whether it be one word or a sentence or this hidden book somewhere. But what they're saying is not simply that there is this book, or that there is some lineage that's been handed down of all these little men hiding somewhere that's got this secret, and they all pass it along. They may say that, and they may make an interesting and intriguing story, and maybe a hobby for somebody. But what they are still manifesting is if there was some information outside this loop, outside the linear express, if there was some stop, we could call it God, we could call it the truth. But it also comes out in less dramatic ways that people do not consider. It comes out, and part of the hobbies that most everyone has, the hobby of trying to be themselves. It comes out as a kind of assumption of the efficacy of one's tribal or nationalistic credentials. That is the hobby of being who you are. Like, I'm a Jew. I'm a Catholic. I'm Irish. And the guy said, well, I'm Irish Catholic. Nothing wrong, but it's simply a hobby. But people take it very seriously in the city. It is a kind of attempt. Or for somebody to say, there are people around now that are professional veterans. I assume all of you know that, even though most of you missed all the fun of all the good wars before your time. But there are people that you see them driving around their cars with little veteran caps on from American Legion. I see license plate. I was a veteran. I saw no one. I was a veteran twice. I was a prisoner of war veteran. There are people who are sick as a hobby. They're always sick. They go to the hospital, they keep wearing those little bands 2 years later to identify them. They're always coughing. That is an attempt to find something that seems to be external to them that's stable. Like, I may not be much and I don't know anything, but at least I'm a good Catholic. As though that has some greater significance, that there is some kind of collective conversation between you and the church, whatever it was, that makes me more than what I am individually. Now, this is very common. It's not psychological either. It's not a sociological error on people's part. It's not a weakness. It is an attempt to locate, to believe that there is something outside this linear loop that keeps repeating itself, wherein I cannot tell whether I am running because I'm frightened or whether I'm frightened because I'm running. I cannot tell that I am and therefore I think, or I think and therefore I am. I can't tell, truth be known, whether I'm coming or going. But there seems to be at least a modicum of feeling that every now and then somebody can say, well, I may not be the smartest person in the world, but at least I'm a good Red Dog Democrat, or I'm a good Republican. Well, at least I'm an American. I know that much. I may not have much and I may not be very smart, but by God, I'm an American, or I'm an Italian. There is another aspect that no one would normally recognize in this attempt. This is still a struggle, by the way. Those of you who may have thought you lost your place, it is still a struggle of people attempting to find new information when all they can deal with, and the only thing accessible, is information that is different. Besides trying to locate a God outside the system, which your forefathers and grandforefathers and mothers were a little bit better at, pardon the preposition there, but of locating God somewhere before NASA, like up in the sky, somewhere outside this system. If you begin to get any glimpse beyond the 3D hole, you realize there ain't nothing outside this system. That if he's there, he's hiding, and he's hiding right in plain view. He's just in the fourth dimension, at the very least, or at least the parts that you can see in the three-dimensional, you don't recognize. But I'm not even. The attempt to conceive of something outside the system, of God's, an objective truth, an eternal, unchanging truth, a belief in the power, the substance of one's nationalistic ties, one's religious ties, one's cultural ties. But there's another one. That's the world of ritual. People use that in the same way, not just religiously. That's the obvious one. But the ritual seems to be something outside this merry-go-round. It seems to be something, once you undertake it, that is stable. That, well, my tenement burned down and I lost my husband and two of my children, but I went down to St. Mark's this morning and Mass was still at 7:15. And some of my neighbors were there and they knew the heartbreak, the tragedy I'd been through, and yet there they were, everybody lighting candles. The world is safe. The priest was there, he knew about it, but there is some refuge of stability, something outside this express on which I can depend. People take great pleasure and comfort as best they can in ritual. But let me tell you what rituals are, from the view of trying to expand what you see of life. Is rituals are ignorance, uncertainty, and fears in action. Every ritual in the world, from lighting candles to chanting to praying to every morning, you would not leave the house if you accidentally put on your right sock before your left one, or that if you combed your hair before you brushed your teeth, that if you let the cat out before you started the coffee, whatever it is. And of course, I'm trying to drag it down to a fairly mundane level there with the cat and the coffee, but people take rituals that would appear to be more serious than that. They take them to be some kind of meaningful statement that there is a kind of knowledge, there is a kind of intelligence, there is a kind of life outside of me. And every time I step into this ritual, every time I participate, I've got to be getting closer. You know, else why would I keep putting up with this damn shit? You know, why would I do this if it's not going to pay off? If in some way I'm not pleasing some kind of higher powers. It's still a part of the hobby of being oneself. It is, you've got to admit, a fairly, usually inexpensive hobby. But it's almost sad, if you get a certain view of it, to see that no one, under ordinary conditions, ever seems to note any pleasure, not in being a Jew or a Catholic or a Muslim or Italian or Irish or rich or poor, of somebody just having, or seem to express any joy in being a human. Now, of course, I meant sad in quotation marks because I'm not sure what it means. I keep reading about it, but sad. There's another aspect of this. Let's see if I can drag you towards. When people do think about, when people say they think about change, it's always a change of the lower order. And by lower order, I'm back to, let me draw it in a more direct fashion. Again, the same, but the way I oftentimes do it, if we were talking about this being the visceral level, and up in here somewhere the emotional level, and up in here the operations of the cortex, man's intellect. When men think of change, when men talk of change, which of course is life talking to change, but I don't want to confuse it, it's always from here down. Think about it a second. Yeah, I was right. It's always from here down. The idea of change, the idea to everyone of change, without them analyzing it this way, is coming about. They see it, they think about it as coming about, if at all possible, from the lower levels, that is physically or emotionally. Never this. Never. There's several modes of view I could conjure up verbally. One being this. For you people just seeing this on tape, my speech about conjuring up, may I suggest, and all that, I'm not being cute with words, nor am I speculating. So, between those two things I'm not, figure it out. May I suggest, one of the reasons that when ordinary intelligence thinks about, talks about, hears about any possible change, it's always in the lower areas of the nervous system, is because of this. One reason, but here's a prime reason. In the three-dimensional scheme of things, it is only in the lower regions that man has any certainty. To wit, let's, again, artificially, temporarily, let's cut man off and say we're just talking about the operations at the visceral level of the body. In this great dualistic, normally perceived dualistic world, no one with any ordinary intelligence has any doubt if they go up to a range top and stick their finger on one that's hot, to say, ah, it's hot. There's no doubt. There's no discussion. Move up a little bit in what seems to be the to the area of emotions. People have no trouble. They do not doubt if someone says, I'm mad. When you say you're mad, you don't think, well, maybe I'm mad. If it's emotions, and you're mad, I am mad at Siegfried. You're mad. It's a no more question than it is if you stuck your finger in a flame to go, ah, it's hot. But once the visceral and the limbic systems gets up to the point, to the brain, and you begin to talk, that is, a conversation then begins to take place between you and you, the dialogue, then things become less certain. Sophisticated person still, no matter how sophisticated, will assume that he's didn't go to Georgia Tech or MIT, so that if he sticks his finger in the fire, he still goes, wow, it's hot. But now we move up a little into areas that would seem to be of some more importance to humans. The example I used before, when I said that ordinary intelligence would say that I have no trouble distinguishing, if I'm mad, damn it. But once it starts talking and falls into this dialogue with the brain, then you start hearing things, if not overtly, to yourself. I know I said I was mad at Siegfried, but you know I could just kind of be psychologically projecting my own subconscious anger onto him. In other words, you're not really sure, are you really mad at Siegfried? Maybe he reminds me of that uncle I used to have that used to always be tickling me and call me fatso when I was a kid. He does look a lot like old Elmer. Things become less certain. This should not be hard for anyone to see. I gave what I thought should be absolutely obvious examples. If you hurt yourself, if you turn your ankle, there is no question about it. If you are hurt physically, if you are full of food, if you would just have a good, and you're laying there and you're holding your tummy or whatever other appropriate part, there is no question with an ordinary, middle of the bell curve, bourgeoisie, middle class person in the city life of life. There is no question, no uncertainty. And then ordinarily, there is no uncertainty whatsoever into what people say they feel. At that moment, I love so-and-so. Oh, I just love him to death. Or I hate him. But there is no such certainty. None. Once the nervous system is activated to the point of the brain, we got to turn the tape over. Can you see any connection between what I was just talking about and what I also told you that ordinary intelligence, the routine operations of the human intellect, is not prepared to deal with, this is all relative, but just follow it, new information as opposed to different information. And what you're dealing with when you get into the intellect is you're dealing now with an area, not in your lifetime necessarily, but you're dealing with an area that is now trading in new information. I was afraid of that. All right, let's try it this way. There is nothing all that new happening physically. Do you follow that? You have not changed drastically from your mother and father. I assume your parents both had 2 ears and 2 eyes, roughly your size. Chances are the same color basically as you are. Emotionally, Is anything that much different from your parents, your grandparents' generation? Even your reading of history, has man changed that much emotionally? Not if you can read. Not if you can just feel the history down in your own DNA. Men are not that much different emotionally, as they call it. But here, you cannot recognize. You could recognize emotionally and physically if you were dropped now in the world of Athens. Go back and read their poetry, even in translations. Read what they say about love, friendship, the gods, and all that. And then look at them. You know, the togas you might look good in a toga. The thing is, physically, you would be at home. And some of you could speak a little Greek. Emotionally, things are not that much different. But my God, if you got through and you hung around for a while and you got hungry and you said, where's the McDonald's? Or I'd like to see the news, see if anybody's noticed I'm here. And they went, what's the news? And you said, where's the TV? And they said, what's the TV? Intellectually, in this area, what you would know would be new. I mean, it'd be so new you would talk to them, and very shortly, I would suggest that they would go around behind the building and say, wait a minute, and they'd all go around behind the building and go, you know, the man's a loony. They wouldn't even understand it. Can you see that there is a specific, physiological as always, if I must point it out, reason that the intellect operating at its ordinary level cannot take in new information. It takes in different information. At the very best it can do, it takes that which seems to be alterations. This gets into another byplay, and it has to do with the complexity of systems. I mentioned this the last time we were taping, but let me put it to you in a slightly expanded manner. Is that the more complex a system is, which includes men, but the more complex a system is, the better it can absorb criticism, inquiries, even assaults. Now, speaking of humans, we can ignore the assaults on the physical level. Let's consider, as they would say in the city, the psychological stresses of being alive. Anything more complex can absorb stress better than that which is more simplistic. How about a real life example? If you had a single proprietorship, some business, a guy opens a shoe repair store, saved up all his money, pays the rent up in a little strip shopping center, he opens it up and he's there. He's the only guy there day and night. Then let's say that down the street in a big shopping center, Sears, let's say, has a shoe repair place somewhere. Sears and everything connected to Sears can absorb stress vis-a-vis the shoe repair department. Criticism. That is, well, some of you think you already hear it. A guy's running the department, several people. There'd be more than one at a Sears. They're open 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. And people come and complain about the shoddy work. Every day, 2 or 3 people come in, banging their shoes and say, I'm not going to pay for this kind of crap. No. And you know what would happen at a Sears. It's normally we're getting into what people condemn as a kind of bureaucratic denial of people saying, hey, I just work here. That whole thing of the bureaucratic denial that it's not my responsibility, by the way, is not condemnable. It is a sign of the vigorous health of the immunity system or whatever the system is. But at any rate, this one guy, just think about it as you, save all your money, and for whatever reason, you are just continually confronted with people coming in, complaining about the work you did. The more simplistic, this one proprietorship operation, I suggest, could not last long in the real 3D world. The guy would just go out of business. I don't have to explain that anymore. He might come down with ulcers. He may just lose all of his business. He may decide to hell with this. But the more complex a system is at Sears, they can absorb that. If that wasn't plain enough, go back to the bureaucracy. Go complain to the government. Go and try and say that they made a mistake on your driver's license, or they changed your property tax in a manner that you can show is biased, is outside the realm of the current zoning laws, the tax assessor's roles. And whoever you get, the chances are, especially if you go in with stress on your mind, go in waving something and hollering, "Damn it, I'm tired of coming up here. Doesn't anybody here at the government or at the post office, this department, doesn't anybody know what they're doing?" Somebody say, "Whoa, dude, I just work here. Give me a break. It ain't my job." So you can say, "I want to see somebody," so he can pull in a supervisor. And as soon as you lay this kind of criticism, this kind of inquiry, like, "What kind of nuts do you have here? Don't you train anybody?" You know by now he's going to say, "Hey, I can tell you're upset, sir. You better see the general district supervisor." And then he's not here. He's in Washington. He's somewhere else. Or even if you do track him down, you do know by now. People criticize this. It's treated as satire and sarcasm, that the bigger an organization is, the less impact an individual can apparently have. True, but it's not condemnable. If you enjoy being alive right now at all, or you find it acceptable vis-a-vis the current apparent alternative, you should be thankful of systems that seem to be so complex that you cannot have an effect on them individually through your criticism. You should be thankful, even if you don't deal with them. Or to find out that people can go in and criticize the church, whatever their church is, and it has no effect. Their local government, big government. Even if you don't do it, when you hear it, when you see it done, and then you see the little individual shaking their fist or protesting, rather than you thinking, "Yeah, you're right." Well, sure they're right, but you're taking the wrong side if you want to stay alive. Of course, it's not a matter of sides, but it is showing the health of its immunity factor. That it is complex enough that it can, from certain views, run amok, not do its job. And you can go punch on it, you can kick at it, you can make obscene gestures, you can do anything you want to. What does the post office care? What does Sears care? What does God care? What does the Catholic Church care? I'm sick of this. I've been praying to be a millionaire. I've lit 2,000 candles and nothing happened. If I don't get rich tomorrow, I'm not coming back. And the priest thinks, "Hey, I just work here. What do you want from me?" That's between you and God. Nobody cares because of the immunity factor. Now, I hate to ask this. I was just wondering myself while I was sitting here talking, does anybody see any possible significance of this with an individual? I know, well, I don't. Let's go on. I don't know. I could suggest this, though, since I have stated that fact, and it is a fact that the more complex a system is, the better it can absorb everything from inquiry. There's just somebody sticking their nose in your business, or the system's business, to actual criticism, down to assault. Like, to hell with the post office. I'll never trade here again. You'll never get another letter from me. The post office can live with it. The government can live with it. Sears can live. J.C. Penney's can live. You can go up there, or Exxon, you can tear up your card and throw it at the president and say, "I'd walk before I'd buy any more Exxon gas." Exxon somehow will probably stumble through. Now, since I can't see any personal significance with this, like I said, but I was going to go on and say, if there was any, on an individual level, then I would have to suggest that part of what this kind of activity, whatever the hell this is, this kind of stuff, would have to do with you trying to enrich yourself to make your system more complex. Not in any way that I can easily define, but hell, that won't stop me talking about it. A little I was trying to point out the last time we met was I was pointing out that the more simplistic a system is, like a person, the more they can be apparently directly assaulted by, at least, let me say, anomalous input. You remember the example I made of some fanatic religious person, and whatever his religion is, somebody comes along with information comes to him that, hey, the whole basis of your religion, the guy who started admitted it was all a fraud. Or we just found out that, Moses stole all these ideas from a guy down and that kind of thing. All of you should be able to hear some piece of that the more simplistic a person is, the more they seem vulnerable to stress. And I don't mean just a psychological sense. That they say, well, I'm a good American. I may not be much and I'm poor. You know, I work for a septic tank cleaner outer company. I won't go any further with that. I live in a trailer park, a used trailer park. I have a used wife and used children. But by God, I'm an American. And it seems important. He has little flags all over his car. And patriotism is important. I'm not laughing at patriotism. Is just as important as General Motors and Sears and everybody else staying in line. It's very important if you want to stay alive. I don't mean American patriotism, all patriotism, wherever you're living. You should be in favor of it. You don't have to participate, but you should be in favor of it and encourage others to do so. But the guy's got the flags. He wears a little hat. You know, saying I'm an American. All right, this guy is subject. You should hear me now. He is very subject to be staying around a bar staying out there in the trailer park and somebody drive through and holler, "Fuck America." The guy may kill this fellow. He may assault him. Or he could almost have a heart attack. He cannot absorb anomalies. He cannot absorb stress. The system is too simplistic. Now, we're not laughing at people who work for septic tank companies or live in trailer parks. If you think you're laughing at them, you don't know who the joke's on. The more simplistic any system, your system is, the more subject you are to everything from stress, not just psychological, but the stress of being alive all the way to the breaking point. Put the way I was trying to get you to look tonight, looked at from the other side. The more complex you are, the more you can absorb what happens in life that would appear to you to be anomalies. The untoward, the unexpected. That which in fact, according to your plan, that suddenly you look down and the opposition is presently in charge. The thing that you believe to be true is suddenly proclaimed by everybody around you to be false. But the thing that you thought you were interested in, the company has now discontinued the product. Another aspect of this, when I said that you should enrich yourself, if you were trying to do this, whatever this is, if you're trying to see beyond the peephole, you have got to be more complex. I'm not in love with that word. Just if you're trying to follow any of this, if you've got any interest in being here, watching these tapes, just follow it for a few more minutes. Be more complex, as opposed to what I was trying to describe through those fairly ludicrous examples of someone with a very simplistic structure. I guess you would call their personality, their belief systems. But it's their total structure. It is their loop. The more simplistic it is, the less likelihood that you're going to see beyond very crude fanatical levels having to do with anything. Not just nationalism, not just politics, not just religion, but everything. Sexual, socially, anything. And so you should be able to follow, at least for a second, for the sake of humoring me, that it might be, on that basis, it might be good for one to try and become more complex. Because that sounds reasonable, it doesn't sound dangerous or un-American. But now, would you care to note this? All of the systems that life presents to man that would apparently be involved with trying to get people to be more complex, what do they teach? They're simplistic, under the guise of making you more complex. Anyone who doubts this, I'll go back, because this is what most of you are familiar with, because it's for very good reason. Throughout the history of man, that which seems to be some potential way that a person could undergo some extraordinary change, to become a new person, to have some kind of new feel, some kind of new experience. Something extraordinary has normally been under the guise of religion of some sort, or spiritual activity of some kind. All right, back to where you didn't lose your place, did you? I had you sort of agreeing that yes, it would be based upon my presentation right now, that would be good for a person to be more complex. What do all these systems offer? What do they encourage people to do? To be more simplistic. That is, the very thing they say, well, what you're looking for, a priest, a rabbi, a guru somewhere that you meet, and he hears your little story, he says, I can see those little sad eyes. What you want to do, you want to find the truth, or you want to find God. You go, yeah, yeah, yeah. That is, you want to be more enriched, you want to be more complex. You go, yeah, yeah, yeah. So what did they give? All right, here's a secret word. From now on, repeat it every time you breathe. Don't you tell anybody else. Here's the word. Go do something very ritualistic. Every Friday, don't eat fish. Every Thursday, don't eat macaroni. Every morning at 7:15, go somewhere and light 3 candles and make some kind of sign and say something in Latin or in Albanian. It's not a plot. The church is not after you. There's no woolly guru somewhere that's after you to try to take advantage of you. But I want you to see that the way things are arranged when you're trying to look at the activities of any system, now I'm talking about the system of life itself, from the level that is not above the system. Even if it's equal to the system, it cannot fully perceive itself. And so the very things that apparently life is letting offer to humans, the promise, the potential, that here's the way you could enrich yourself. Here's how you could become more complex in your consciousness. All right, tell me how. It's very simple, I'll tell you how. And sure enough, they tell you something that is more simplistic than you are now. Nobody notices it. It's just a hobby. It's fairly inexpensive. But it is not the way people are going. And it gets down to a very refined level. It is, what it amounts to is life offering the ill-timed to the ill-prepared. Not even like that. But there's reality to it, not just that little phrase. Life is continually, to those who think they're interested in some kind of extraordinary information or some sort of new experience, is continually, when I say the inopportune or the ill-timed to the ill-prepared, it constantly presents, for instance, there's 2 ways, as always, as you can see this. It is offering information, energy, that is too simplistic to complex, and it is offering information that's too complex to simplistic. And it's always been thusly. Life presenting to someone who thinks they're interesting. I'll give you an example. Offering that which is too simplistic to the complex. Figure we got, I know it's going on, it's got to be, a nice, everyday, just ordinary, but right in the rat race of the business world in San Francisco, and a few nights a week, or sometimes he goes to some storefront or somewhere to study Buddhist ideas. Think about it. Zen ideas, not picking on Zen anymore, I'm picking on religion, that's not it, or any church. But here it is, a man complex, in the ordinary sense. Not anything extraordinary, nothing to be spoken of as being admirable, but as opposed to somebody illiterate living in some, what little parts are left, at least semi-illiterate, in some feral part of the world. Opposed to that, this guy is more complex. And he's going to study Zen ideas to become enriched. Or maybe he's going to try and save his money and go to some monastery that's 200 miles south of Kyoto on some little island to where they got no electricity, no running water. They got some monks there that smile and are kind of, he assumes, a beatific attitude, and they're illiterate. And he goes there to seek, what do they call it? Satori or wisdom or enlightenment. And the people smile at him. They can't speak English. He can't speak Japanese. And maybe they point, and everybody's sitting there, and they sit all day and don't move, and they point at him and point to him. He goes, ah. And so he sits there. There's nothing wrong. But the idea that you're going to take more simplistic energy and give it to somebody more complex, and this is going to enrich them, can you just get a fleeting glimpse of it flying by, that even at the ordinary level, this almost strange credulity, that this almost would make somebody go, I'm not sure. But this has always been true. This is not just people in 1989 in San Francisco trying to study Zen ideas, or people from the 60s traveling to India. You can turn it the other way, and you can take that life is continued. Now, I hesitate to give specific examples. Let me give it to you generally and see if any of you get it. Life continually has presented information too complex to the simplistic. And the general example is this. It's all new ideas to everybody. The reality behind such activity is this. Life's more complex information that it continually lets out. And it does, it comes out. History is replete with it. What you imagine, stuff you never imagined. But this kind of information, and of course all religions, I'm not trying to make it secretive, all the ideas of religion. Should love your neighbor as yourself. Let's take that one. That crosses all religious bounds. That information is too complex. Literally. It is too new. The only way people can deal with it is treat it as different information. Now, I know they pay lip service to it, and I know people thousands of years ago and people right now will say, hey, that's it. Don't make fun of that because that's the secret. That's the secret. But people who say that, ordinary people, it is not part of their nervous system. Or I put it very bluntly, they cannot actually do it. They can say they're trying to do it, and as always, failure passes for success. That is by admitting, well, hell no, I can't do it. But that's why I keep trying. I guess I ought to do that some other time. It's known as the incompetency factor. Or boast. It's what people insist on, no less than total incompetence. Or else why would you go seek sexual advice from a priest? But at any rate, life continues to offer information that is too complex for the simplistic. Now, I feel, I like to say that sometimes, I feel that perhaps enough of you got that for me not to keep making or narrow down the examples. It is just what people have normally thought of as being some kind of secret information, thought of as being objective truth. Or they hear some idea, whatever it is, that God is love, or the secret of wisdom is to love everybody as you love yourself. And it seems to make your nervous system almost tremble that, God, that's got to be it. I just know it is. I just know it is. It does not become part of your real information, though. It does not actually change your nervous system. You do not die a different nervous system structure than that. It is not different than the one you were born with. It has not altered. The information sounded as though it were sort of new, but if I asked you, and you could answer it directly, if I said, is that actually new information? That you saved up all your money and you traveled to Tibet and you found this guy that you wanted to see, and you climbed up there and you tore your clothes and you got your feet all bloody, and you climbed up and you asked him the secret, and he said, a wet bird never flies in May. Or he says, love your neighbor as yourself. And you'd been through all that, you'd go, man, how heavy. And if I suddenly jumped out of the bush and I said, well, now wait, is that really new information? You'd have to say, well, I guess I kind of already knew that, but I don't know, hearing it from him. I just didn't have the authority. When the information is too complex, when it's too new, simple structures cannot hear it. Now, it has an effect. You should be able to see that. I don't have to defend that. Ideas about God is love, or love your neighbor as yourself. It has an effect. It is useful to life, or people would not have been repeating it for 5,000 years. But it is not new information. The new information, behind everything there is some new information. If you could take love your neighbor as yourself, and if we're going to call that two-dimensional information, if you could get off the edge there somewhere, if you go around the corner and see the rest of that, then you'd have some new information. You would be more enriched, you would be more complex. Then, as some people would probably want to think, then you might be able to do something about it, which is not the point. But I would suggest again to you that there is always a beautiful place to look into this crack beyond the hole that you've got, if you can look around just a little bit, and to see that the very things that life drives men to do, not through some ill-natured purpose of life toward man, but of continually making people believe, especially people that think they're interested in whatever the hell this kind of stuff is, that I am seeking something new, something drastic. And yet they are the prime suspects of the first example of being presented, because that's all that's normally available, is being presented, being offered information that is more simplistic than you were to start with, and it's accepted as being more complex. That all I've got to do is fast all the time. All I've got to do is something at a lower level, dance, quarrel until I throw up, or to chant something 2 or 3 hours a day, certain days of the week. Something very simplistic. Or to go hang around people more simplistic than I am, and that in some way will make me more complex. That in some way will enrich me. From the three-dimensional view, it also appears, this is not by any means the full extent of the reality of it, but it also is observably manifested in this way, that life seems to drive men to continually look to the past for what they consider to be instructions to move into the future, to find only perfection in the past. And if any of you think, well, that's some kind of psychological trick, I would suggest again to you, before the tape runs out, there's a reason for that. That everybody, no matter their degree of intelligence and education, everyone is struck by, once it's pointed out, whether they define it this way or not, they are struck that sometime in the past things were better. Or typically the story of being driven from paradise, that men just blew the whole gig somewhere and now they're paying for it. But that perfection resides in the past. There's a reason for that. There is a neurobiological reason, and I've already given you one way to look at it, and that is in the lower regions, which is the past of your nervous system. It is only there that you can be certain. It is only where the duality of, well, it's hot or it's not hot, or I feel full or I'm not full, I feel freshly and totally fucked, or I'm still not satisfied. If it's in the past, it can be dealt with on the basis that it seems to have laid down and died. That is, cells died when I stuck my finger in the fire. It's hot. There's no question about it. Somebody doesn't come along and say, well, would we care to go through some kind of revisionist attempt at history? You said you burned your finger, but now that you've had a few seconds to think about it, and you screamed out, God damn it, that's hot. Would you care, before this gets into the permanent record upstairs, would you care to revise this? Then you might say, well, all right. But if you were operating at the higher end of the nervous system, you'd have to say, no. But the reason I was almost tempted to say, well, it wasn't that bad, that which was hurting, part of it's already dead. If it lays down and dies, if it apparently is still, if it will apparently at least lend itself to a dualistic view, it always seems to be perfection. Or at least it seems to be better than what's going on now. And so everybody, if it were not for that, if you need any other way to look at it, not sarcastically, not critically, but you would have to see that there would be no religions. Why would anybody need a religion? It's always that things were better in the past. Were it not for that, there would be nothing in anyone's nervous system. The molecules, the message has been carried through your own DNA, would not even recognize a church. It would be like information through the grace of architecture that was either too complex or too simplistic, and you wouldn't even see it. If I jumped out of the bushes and said, did you realize that you just passed a church? You go, what? What's a church? Or I try to describe it. You'd think, well, I say I remember a bar, and I remember the massage parlor, and well, I don't remember anything else. The information would go right by you, the reality of it. It is because that which is alive is disturbing. That which is alive is uncertain. And who the hell wants that? Nobody wants that. The businessman wants to go there after work and have this semi-illiterate somebody from another culture, another time, another place tell him, sit here and go, and stare at your big toe. And he thinks, what a relief. It's the relief from being out of the midst of the turmoil, the din of this thing, that I feel better. I'm not picking on Zen or any kind of ritual. It's all the same thing. Or he takes up something that seems to be a meditation technique. Or he tries to run feedback on himself. Or perhaps he takes a Valium. It's all the same thing. It's an attempt to move into the past. It doesn't really, that's not the way it goes. I just use that to verbally describe it. It's just an attempt to stay where you are, because you can't actually move into the past. But people certainly do not want to stay where all the confusion is and the uncertainty, which is right there. It is right where the higher end is talking to the lower end, and everything seems uncertain. Well, I'm not sure I'm doing the right thing. Maybe I should stop being a Catholic and become a, Republican or a Muslim. Maybe I should start wearing a dress and hang around the bus station. Maybe I should quit eating meat. No, I tried that. I'll go back to eating meat. Maybe I should quit drinking. Maybe I should take up drinking. Maybe I should try and be nicer to my mother. Maybe I should kill her, like I always wanted. There seems to be no end to it. It is the linear express, and there is no permanent stop. There is nowhere that apparently the nervous system can stop and say, somebody tell me something. But what passes is, you go to a priest for sexual advice. You go to a seminar teaching you how to be a millionaire, and you find out it's common knowledge the guy's in bankruptcy. That didn't stop anybody. You go to another human, more simplistic, or at least as simplistic as you, and say, tell me, do you know the great secret? And the guy kind of looks like, well, I'm all right. Would you tell it to me? It is the kind of assurance that everything is dead. That is, there is some external, to me, there is some external point of reference that's not going to change. Priests may come and priests may go, but the Catholic Church, by God, is always there. I am certainly glad, as always, there's no possible personal significance to any of this, or else somebody might start saying, well, wait a minute. Never mind all that stuff about the church and politics. God damn, I've been doing that to myself all my life. No, you're probably confused. I don't know. You probably took what I said wrong, if you tried to take it that far. Although I will admit, you may not be totally amiss by trying to do that. I don't know, it just, now I think about it, there might be some basis for you pursuing a consideration along those lines. If you ever did, I would also suggest that if it got you started of thinking that yes, I have done all of that. I have been my own priest, my own rabbi, I have been my own opposition, I have been my own express, I have been every place that I seem to have stopped and thought, I'm getting somewhere, or this may be it. All of that has taken place within my own nervous system, within my own life. I have discussed this, now I know what you mean when I keep talking about the dialogue, the old partnership, that there is, it's me and me, or it's me and I, or it's I and me. It's me the talker, me the listener. Me the listener, and then me the talker. Even if you should pursue such a questionable line of inquiry, I must stress from the other night that I didn't give that as really a throwaway line. Everybody believes, once I'd pointed out, everybody will accept that they do have a dialogue going on, but then everyone believes that their dialogue is singular. Not just what is said, not just what is thought to your inside, but your voice is you. Although you've never heard that voice, now you've heard yourself overtly move your larynx and make a sound, but the voice inside, that dialogue, you've never heard it, and yet if I say, would you believe that somebody else's voice sounds like yours? You go, no. You know, if I say, well, now you assume that everybody else has got some kind of dialogue going on constantly. Yeah. All right, do you think that their dialogue, the voice inside of their own system sounds like yours? I would suggest everybody would say, well, certainly not. They don't know why, but they just, well, no, that wouldn't be. Well, now, as far as the content, it's true, before you laugh too much. But you're not talking to you. The dialogue is not between you and you. The the dialogues between you and life, and a part of what some of you might find beautiful once you begin to see it is that life, speaking to everyone, has everyone thinking that the voice is singular to them. Now, if you cared to pursue that, I would suggest you in closing a further real suggestion that sure could explain a lot. And I mean a lot. Want to venture